Right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Optegrity U presents Gigbot 101, Capturing Defects and Mastering the Workflow. My name is Josh Wines. I am the Director of Customer Success and Training here at Optegrity. Wear a lot of hats here, and my favorite one is probably training new customers or even old customers. And helping you all get the most out of your Optegrity applications, and so that way you can really make an impact on your shop floor and improving your quality and increasing your operational excellence and chasing whatever KPIs you might be looking at. So that's what I like to do, and that's what I do here. So today's goal is we are going to be covering our Gigbot application. We're probably going to do a series of Gigbot application webinars. Today, we're just going to be kind of going over the basics. We're going to go over the how the application works, some of the dashboards, kind of the basic bones of the application, and then we'll go over the workflow, the defect workflow, how a defect is captured, corrected, and then verified. And then we'll probably do some other future sessions. We're going to go over how to run checklists and then some of the reporting that we can get out of Gigbot. So let's jump into it. All righty, here we go. Let me share my screen here. All right. So when you first log into your Optegrity server, you'll see something like this. You'll see the applications that you can have access to, the ones you're subscribed to. The one that we're looking at today is Gigbot, our defect tracker and traceability management. So let's click on that and get it going. All right, so you notice that when we first log in, the first thing we're going to see is going to be our dashboard. Dashboard's got some really cool stuff going on there. We can customize our dashboards. We can create new dashboards. We can share dashboards. We can do a lot of cool stuff here. So let's kind of talk about how we do that. So the first thing you'll see is you have these nice little squares, these little cards. These are all customizable. You can drag them around, move them around. This is a defects chart that shows defects over time. This is top 10 defect codes. Internally, we can see our performance on defects. We can see our DPU calculation. This is our test data. There's not a whole lot of ongoing defect tracking in our test server. If this is a live environment, you'd see multiple bars here representing the months and then the actual days. Each day would have its own of the current month. So in this case, July. You'll see here we have each of the days has its own bar that's going to represent the DPU for that day. And then you'll have a total an average July DPU, and then we can talk more about how that's set up and how that's calculated. So on our reporting day, our reporting session. But yeah, and then these will as the month. Let's say we roll into August here next week. All of these individual days will be just rolled up into the July, and we'll start over again with August 1, August 2, August 3, etc. That's probably one of my favorite charts as far as like getting you actual actionable data here. You also see your department status, a whole bunch of other components that you can get access to. If you click on component here, you can see all the different defects, or at least all the different widgets that we can add to the dashboard. And the way you can do that is by simply clicking add, and I'll do a spin, and then here you can see here's our top 10 defects, code for vendor defects, things like that. You can add that data on here. So that's how dashboards work. Let's say you want to make a new dashboard. You'll see I've got a couple dashboards here. This is my default view. I have one for a primary weld department, one called exterior skins. If I click on dashboard settings, you can see what each of these are. So here's our default view. We can see this is set to all of them, or well, all of the divisions. We designed Optegrity to work for everything from small job shops to full like enterprise deployments. We're across multiple divisions, across multiple business units, multiple sites, etc. This is where we can control that in the dashboard view. So if we were to say, let's say I'm a CEO and I have multiple business units that report and work under me, I can see all that data by selecting the different divisions I want to look at, the business units within those divisions. If I want to select all, I can see all those. There's particular sites I want to look at. I can select those. Or if I want to select an individual site, I can do that. Same with departments. I can do that. I can select a few departments. For example, if I click on primary weld, you can see here that if I want to see just the primary weld department, I'm doing that. We're just looking at that. I can also adjust the date range here. So right now we're looking at all data. But let's say I want to look at just the last quarter. I can choose to do that as well. Also delete dashboards here so they no longer show up on your little dashboard bar up here. You can also share dashboards. So let's say I want to share a dashboard with a colleague. I can say, give them a little note, say, hey, check this out. And then I can choose their name from this drop-down box, and it will automatically send them this dashboard. And then they'll be able to click on it in the email that they'll receive from the system and say, hey, Josh, I want to share a dashboard with you. You can click on it and you can view the get the dashboard right on your added to your dashboards. So that's a pretty handy way to make a cool display you want to share with your colleagues. You can do that. So that's dashboards. Pretty intuitive, not a whole lot to it. Just jump right onto it. The next thing we want to talk about is jobs. So to capture defects, we first have to put them on jobs. And there are a couple different ways we can add jobs to Gigbot or to Optegrity in general. Is first off, we can connect with your ERP. So if you have an ERP you're running, we've connected with M4, Business Dynamics, Mapix, a whole bunch of others. We can connect to those through a variety of methods, and we can pull in job data, or we can have that job data exported and we can read it. A couple different ways, a few different ways we can do that. You can see that in jobs, like clicking on this. And you can see a list of all the available jobs that we can put defects on, right? So let's see here, this is a table that shows all of our jobs. If I want to see what those jobs look like, I can click on that. If I want to close those jobs, and we'll talk more about that later. It's kind of outside the scope of what our training was going to be today. We can add new jobs by clicking here. We can add jobs individually. If I have a whole bunch of jobs, let's say I have an Excel spreadsheet that production control gave me, I can download the template, copy and paste the information into the template, and then upload it from here. And we can upload that job information. So that's how jobs work. Jobs can be, you have some jobs here that have multiple quantities. So like 10 quantities, we're making 10 of whatever this is. For a lot of these, we're making just individuals. So it's like we're making one job that's going to be this, and it's going to go through value stream B. Maybe we'll do a session just on jobs, how the jobs table works and how it interacts with all of our different applications here at Optegrity. But it's a pretty important part of making Gigbot work. So that's the main thing. That's one thing. The next thing that is important for driving Gigbot is our defect codes. You'll find those here. So we have our defects. And if we want to actually make meaningful data out of our defects, we want to assign them defect codes. These defect codes, a few different ways of doing that. The way we recommend is that you have a larger buckets as possible. And then from there, as that data becomes big and as you realize you have like larger and lots of data, you can then start shrinking down and getting those buckets more specific and more narrow, defining the scope of those. You can Pareto those buckets. So for example, let's say you have a defect code called dent, right? So maybe that's a defect code that we have. And then from there, you can narrow those down. So maybe you have dents that are caused by damage by something. Maybe a better defect could be scratches. You have scratches in glass. You can have scratches in paint. You can have scratches in sheet metal. You can have scratches in finished wood. I don't know what you're making, but you can have defect codes in all those. So you have your defect codes, and the defect codes look like this. There's some values to the defect codes. So let's say we have a defect code. Those defect codes are created by a department. So for example, we can have defect codes. We can have a scratch that is created by our paint department. We can have a scratch defect code that is created by our primary weld department. We have a scratch defect code that's made by the final installation department, right? So a defect codes, one way to imagine it is we have this big batch of defect codes. We narrow it first by department, and then we can narrow it even further by assigning them to an area. So maybe if our department is electrical assembly, maybe we're building school buses, and we have the department is final electrical, and they're the ones who do all the electrical work inside the unit to build, to install lights and wiring and all that stuff. And you have a list of defect codes, and inside those defect codes, you can get even more specific. So let's say we have electrical defects that are tied to lights. We can have electrical defects that are tied to speakers. We can have electrical defects that are tied to sensors, other random things, right? So from there, we can choose final electrical, our defect code area, maybe lights, and then defect code there is maybe a final defect code is lights not working, right? And so we'll talk more about how we actually add a defect. I'll show you what this looks like in practice. But what that does, that allows you to take this huge long list of defects and shrink it down to a very manageable scope. So your operator just like clicks a few buttons, and then next thing you know, you're able to see like, yep, I've got a list of 5 defect codes. Boom, that's the defect code I want to put this one in. Boom, and that way you can start collecting actual data, and so we can start looking at Pareto charts, and we can get into that. We'll talk more about those Pareto charts when we get to our reporting day, and we'll talk about that. You can also have defect code severity. So maybe you have a default defect code severity. Maybe a missing light is a severity of 3 out of 10. It's not that big of a deal. Maybe you have an issue where like the engine doesn't start in your, maybe you're building RVs and the engine won't turn over. That's a pretty big deal, right? So maybe that's a defect code 9 or 10. I don't know, maybe you can have your own scale. The cool thing about a lot of these drop-down codes or drop-down boxes is that you can define those. You as a customer will get to define those when we onboard you. And so you can define what our area is going to be inside these departments, what our department's going to be, what are the severity of our defect codes going to be. And then you as a site can choose that. And that's what's going to drive these drop-down boxes. So it's really customizable. You can really make this fit your particular organization. So talk about defect codes. We've talked about defect jobs. Let's get into the defect database. This is the meat and potatoes of Gigbot. Let's jump into it here. This is our defect database. Now, when we capture a defect, defects all go into a defect database, which is a giant long table of every single defect that you're capturing. A couple different ways of looking at this data. Right now, we're looking at a table. And the cool thing about this is we can search this. We have advanced search. You'll see this button show up a lot in a lot of our applications. And so if I want to search my particular defect code, from back to that, if I want to say, show me everything that's a missing rivet, I can select that, hit search, it'll return all my missing rivets. I want to search for every missing rivet that's happened in the last year. I can select my date range for that. If I want to see every missing rivet in the last year that's been captured in a particular department, I can select that and then select this. So you can really start narrowing in the scope of the actual defects that you want to look at. You can really get into the nitty gritty of how you want to search for these defects, and it's kind of peruse this data and look through it. But the primarily way that most of our customers are interacting with the defect database is that they're using the defect database to once they've captured defects, they go into the defect database. Once they're in the defect database, they're using them to assign them to someone to fix them. So someone's going to come up, we want to fix this defect, correct it, and we want to verify it and show that's been bought back or by the quality team or by whatever kind of language you choose to use, verify, buy back, sign off. To say that this defect has been fixed and this unit, whatever we're building, is good to go to the next stage, whether we're going to onto the customer or whether that's going down just to the next stall in your production line. So there are a couple of ways of looking at the status. We've already talked about how we can search it. Right now we're looking at a table, so we can see a table here. You'll notice a couple buttons here. If you click edit, this will take us to the defect database. Delete, this will allow you to delete a defect. This button will show you the cost analysis. We'll talk more about that here in a moment. Clone, this allows you to clone a defect. So if you have a defect that you've already made, you can clone it for a reason. You want to make a duplicate of it. And then this is reopen. So this is if you have a defect that's closed, it was bought back, everything's fixed, so you realize it's not closed, you want to reopen it, you can do that here. You can have that set up as well. Pink ones, you'll see ones that are in this pink, light pink here. That means they're past due. Gigbot assigns an automatic 24 hours to a defect. Maybe we want to correct a defect as quickly as possible when I close it in the next day. Ideally, you can define that time frame based on your organization and your kind of like your schedules and your ordering process and how that works for you. But for the default is 24 hours, and that's why you'll see some of these are pink. They've been in here longer than a day, and they're considered past due defects. Another way of looking at this data is card view. We get to that by clicking show card view. And here we can see all these different cards or all these different defects now are cards. As you'll see, this first one are in process. These are defects that have been captured but not corrected. We have defects that have been corrected, and we finally have defects that are approved. So if we have a defect that's captured, it'll be, let's jump into it now. Let's add a defect. Click add a defect. There's a couple different ways to do that. You saw there is a way to do it from the dashboard. When you first log in, you'll see it add defect here. You can also add defects from, let's scroll fast, from the defect database here. This will take you to the same screen. Also, you can add defects from checklists, which will be a whole nother day. We'll spend just talking about checklists and how we create those and run checklists. But for right now, we're just going to open up by adding this. And we can choose to an internal or a vendor non-conformance. So internal, we'll see it looks like this. If we choose vendor, screen looks a little bit different. The difference is, so internal means we're going to be applying this defect to a job. So if we go back to that jobs table, you can see we start punching in numbers here. We start choosing a job. So that means we're going to put this defect on this unit number. If there had been more data in that jobs table, if we connect to your ERP, we can actually pull in the customer number, customer item number, internal item number, et cetera. We can start pulling that data in from the jobs table. If we had chosen the vendor, instead we would choose a, instead it would choose give us the option to select a PO. And we select a PO because POs are really similar to the jobs table. You add all your POs, the part numbers, the vendor they're coming from, some other information, and then we assign defects to the PO. And then what we can do from there is then we can create a vendor portal, all sorts of cool stuff we can do to create like vendor quality scorecards, things like that. And this is like really useful for like doc audits and things like that. So we're gonna look at internal non-conformance today. So we have internal job number. So we select this. Our site. If you are most of the times our customers only have one site. If you have multiple sites in your facility, you'll have like multiple sites. Maybe like Midland in this case, and multiple sites. You have Midland A, Midland B, Midland C. You would see those. In this case, we just have one. So we're going to choose that one. The description. If we want to put some text in here for the description, we can put that in there. Let's say we captured it and we are in the quality control. If we have an assigned to an inspection gate, we can select that. Capture type, how did we capture this? In-process inspection, post-process, was the doc audit, receiving inspection. Let's say it's in-process inspection. It's captured by me, Josh Wise. I'm the one who's logged in. We're able to get that information. Then here in this final section, we're able to start choosing the origins. So if we know what department created this, we can choose that. This goes back to those defect codes. So remember we talked about defect codes having an origin department, then an area, and then the actual defect code. This is where we get that. So first off, we have origin department. So maybe we choose exterior skins. And then next one up, we can choose what is our disposition of this defect. We're going to rework it. We're going to scrap it, return to the vendor. In this case, we're going to use a rework. Our defect code area. Looks like no defect code areas were defined for this. Let's choose one that I know has some defect code, which is primer welds. They don't have any defect code areas. Body prep. They don't have any defect codes areas either. But you'll see here, if we had some, you see a defect code area, we can select a defect code from area, and that would narrow down this list of defect codes. And then from there, you choose your defect code. All right, and then defect location. So this is, where is this defect location? So right now we have loose connector. You can define different defect locations. Like, really similarly to defect codes. Is this in, let's say we're back from building vehicles again. Is this in the front driver side, rear driver side, exterior skins? You can define all these different locations, and then you can assign where this defect has occurred on whatever it is that you're building. Source employee, do we want to name whoever employee it does this? It's not a required field. No one's really using this currently, but if that's something you want to do or your quality process requires, you can select that. Failure reason, why did this fail? Is it lack of standard, out of calibrated tool, incorrect purchase material, operator error, etc., machine error? We can choose that. How many defects are there? Say it's one. And then workstation, what workstation did it come from? If we know that, we can choose that here. And then the last required field is the material review board. We can choose whether or not this defect is significant enough that needs to go before the material review board. And again, this is all based on whatever quality process you have in process. So maybe if something's over a certain dollar amount, it needs to go before the material review board. That's, again, up to the site and how you want to set your process up. So we've captured this information. Oh, we have one more bit of information we can capture. Is we can attach pictures or documents. If you want, you can drag and drop this. Let's say you're doing this on a tablet, your inspector on your shop floor, you've got a tablet connected to the Wi-Fi, filling all this data in. If you tap on this, this will actually prompt you. Do you want to open up your camera roll, your files, or do you want to open up your camera itself? So let's say you're taking a picture of this, in this case, a loose connector. You can snap a picture of the loose connector. Boom, you have a picture here, and now you have a picture of that, that damage that can now is attached to this defect, and you have that data to go with it, and really kind of help get some visibility on it. So we've got our data here. Let's click Add. Spin for a second, and then the defect will be added to the defect database. All right, so now we can see here this loose connector, this one we captured today. You'll see here is captured by me. So let's say what happens now. So when you capture, let's say quality captures a defect, and you captured it, an email notification is then sent to whoever is the owner of the department. So in this case, body prep. So let's say body prep just got an email saying, hey, Josh got a defect. Send someone up to take care of it. And so the supervisor of body prep is going to tell someone, they're going to come up and they're going to say in charge of fixing this loose defect. So they're able to come here and they're able to do the work. And then once they've done the work, all they need to do to mark this as corrected is simply grab this this card here, this Kanban card, and drag it into the corrected column. And then you'll have this little thing here. It'll say corrected by, and then whoever's logged in, whose name's going to pop up. So let's say I was the one who's dispatched to correct it. I come up, I fix it, and I say I can add notes if I wanted. Fixed loose connector. I can hit that, and now it's corrected. An additional pop-up will come up that says do a chart capturing the cost of poor quality. Again, this is where we connect to your ERP. We can start pulling parts numbers in, part costs in, and so you start plugging in. Let's say we plug in part number, this, and we used 1, and the part cost was a loose connector. Let's say it was 25 cents. So, and then labor rework, we're billing it at temp labor, and it took me half an hour to fix because I had to take the whole thing apart in order to get to that loose connector. Boom, we can add that. If we add that as well, select all fields. That was more fill out. Part quantity 1. So now we're able to start capturing the cost of poor quality. So right now we're at 25 cents and then $12.50 for the labor. And then so you can see really quick, you start adding that up and you start tracking how much information we're capturing by grabbing the cost of our poor quality. So if you're a quality manager and you want to say really justify your efforts, you can start really saying hey, because we've reduced these down defects, we can see this is the amount of money that's leaving our facility because of this sort of thing. So close this. Once we're all done, we can hit close, and now we have this defect is now corrected. If you ever want to look back at that cost of poor quality calculator, you can click that calculation button. If you ever need to change anything, you can click here on this edit button. That'll allow you to change the details if you need to do that. Now, okay, so we've corrected our defect, and quality has now gotten a notification saying, hey, Josh came up, he fixed that loose connector. You're now free to verify it or buy it back or approve it. Well, again, whatever language you use in your organization to talk about that. And you come up there, you double check my work, be like, yep, Josh did a good job, awesome. And from here, you can either drag it to the approved if it's fixed, or you can also drag it to in process. So let's say I didn't fix it, I didn't do it quite right. I wasn't aware of the standard that we needed to have. You can drag it here, and so I'll actually send it back through the process. You can notify it again, kind of go through all that, the whole rigmarole again. Or let's say I did approve it, we can drag it over here, and we can mark it as approved. And again, we get this whole process verified by, we capture my name, notes. Maybe we don't want to put notes in here this time around. Just click verify, and we can see here that this loose connector has been closed. The loop has been closed. We've captured defect, corrected it, and we verified it. So that is the defect workflow really quickly in a nutshell. So with that is the beginning of our Gigbot 101, capturing defects and mastering the workflow.